all the Old Testament. You get the New Testament, the Gospels with Jesus. 600 years later is when Muhammad comes. And these are the sources of authority in Islam. We're going to really focus on the canonical hadith, the Sahih, which is like the authentic hadith, the sayings and actions of Muhammad, and the Quran, which is ultimately like their main authority. We talked about how Muhammad in the first couple of sessions, we talked about how Muhammad kind of evolved as he lived from going as somebody who endured persecution, then permitted retaliation for persecution, then went to war against his persecutors, then promised paradise for martyrs who would fight, they would raid, and eventually, on all the later surahs of the Quran, there was an encouragement of conquest. And where it lands with jihad is ultimately, you find this in the Quran, you find it outside of the Quran, where there are instructions for Muslims that when you meet unbelievers, enemies, you invite them to 3 courses of action. Accept Islam. If they don't, they pay the jizya tax out of submission to Allah, and you agree to be under Sharia law and all that the Quran and the Hadith teach. And then if they refuse to pay the tax, then you fight them and you kill them. And one of the later hadiths that was written is chapters of the Quran, Surah 9. This says it, ultimate authority. Wherever you encounter the idolaters, kill them, seize them, besiege them, wait for them at every lookout post. But if they turn to God, maintain the prayer, pay the prescribed alms, let them go on their way. Whoever changes his Islamic religion, then kill him. I mean, we're going to convert you at the end of a sword, which they did around the world for 1,400 years. And if you leave our religion, then you're going to be killed. We talked about all the different nations that at one time or another, and many of these are still majority Muslim countries that have been conquered by Islam, and how modern day they have shifted the strategy to where now societies are so open that you come in through immigration and try to infiltrate and bring down societies from within. And this was a strategy that started back in the 1950s with a lot of Islamic scholars that the Muslim Brotherhood kind of perfected. And now, we've seen the growth of Islam in Western society tremendously. If you are on Twitter or X, whatever, and you ever watch a Muslim video, goodness gracious, you're going to get that algorithm going. And the amount of terrifying things that you see going over in Europe right now, and the growth of Islam and the militancy of Islam in the West. And I saw today a video of a Christmas market in Germany where thousands of Muslims showed up to shout down Christians in this annual Christmas tradition, shouting out in Arabic that Allah is the only God and Muhammad is his prophet, in a way to intimidate. You see them marching in streets, you see them shutting things down, and you see more and more of that as time goes on. And so that's some of the stuff we've talked about, that and a lot more. If you want to go back and watch those, they're all online. Today we're going to be on the treatment of women. And I want to start by saying poor treatment of women is the norm throughout history. This is the Assyrian code. And I mean, you can find stuff like this in the ancient world pretty easily and different codes. But like this is one I thought, that's a good one to illustrate. This legal code says if the wives, notice that, of a man and the daughters of a man go out into the street, their heads are to be veiled. The prostitute is not to be veiled. She should be known for her shame, in other words. Maidservants are not to veil themselves. Veiled harlots and maidservants shall have their garments seized, and 50 blows inflicted on them, and bitumen, which is like tar, poured on their heads. And so the idea was, if you were a woman, when would you be allowed to cover yourself with a veil, which means that you're a beautiful, noble, protected woman? Well, if you're the daughter of somebody, or if you're the wife of somebody. But if you're out of the home and you're not under a man's protection or a man's guardianship, that means what? You don't be veiled, which means that you're available as a prostitute or a maidservant, which means you're free game in the ancient society. When you open up the book of Ruth and Ruth is walking around in the fields of Boaz, and Boaz has to say, I've told my men not to harm you. Why does he need to say that? Because in the ancient world, throughout all these different cultures, women were free game. And we think, well, Western culture changed that. It wasn't Christianity. Well, listen to what Aristotle said about women, one of the most famous philosophers to ever live. The female is a female by virtue of a certain lack of qualities. We should regard the female nature as afflicted with a natural defectiveness. He would go far today, wouldn't he? But this was Aristotle. And it wasn't scandalous for him to say that. That was the norm. Cato the Elder, very famous. Woman is a violent and uncontrolled animal, and it is useless to let go the reins and expect her not to kick over the traces. You must keep her on a tight rein. He would make it to high office, I think. Plutarch, one of the most famous historians of the Romans. A wife should have no feelings of her own, but share her husband's seriousness and sport his anxiety and his laughter. You have no personality of your own. This isn't radical Islam. This is the biggest names of the Roman world. We consider our society built on Greco-Roman traditions, right? You look at what's going on in the first century in the days of Jesus, infanticide is widely practiced in Greece, Rome, the Roman world. Why? Because they didn't want girls. And so they put together, this was a guy who does demographics in the ancient world, and it said a study of inscriptions at Delphi made it possible to reconstruct 600 families. Of these, only 6 raised more than one daughter. It's estimated that there were 131 males per 100 females in the city of Rome and 140 males per 100 females elsewhere in the empire. Why? Because when you gave birth to a baby girl, what did you do? It was a common practice to do what was called exposure, which means you take the baby and you put it out on the city wall or in a street or whatever, and you say, if the gods want this child to survive, they'll rescue them. But otherwise, I don't, and they set out to be starved to death or to be taken by animals or predators. They found a papyrus from a soldier that's writing home to his wife, and he says, hey, I'm in Alexandria, Egypt. Do not worry if they all come back and I remain in Alexandria. I ask and beg you to take good care of our baby son, and as soon as I receive payment, I'll send it to you. If you are, so she's pregnant, if you are delivered of a child, if it is a boy, keep it. If it is a girl, what? Discard it. You have sent me word, don't forget me. How can I forget you? I beg you not to worry. So this guy's like, oh, sweetheart, don't worry. I love you. I'm never going to leave you. If you have a girl, throw it away. Like this heartfelt pleading with her not to be worried about his affections. And yet in the middle of this letter, it's just like, and if it's a girl, kill it. Like it's nothing. You see in the trial, very famous trial that involved a very famous man, Cicero. In 54 BC, a 12-year-old actress is performing on a stage in Athena. This is disturbing. During the show, a Roman official named Gnaeus Plancius led a group of men to rush the stage and brutally rape the girl. When Plancius was accused of election fraud, later on, he didn't get punished then, but later on, he runs for election, gets appointed to an office anyway, and political opponents they go back into his past and say he was the one who led this event against the 12-year-old girl. Cicero steps up. Now, you probably heard the name Cicero. He's the attorney. He doesn't deny the rape, but listen to his logic. He says, oh, how elegantly must his youth have passed. The only thing imputed to him is one in which there's not much harm, or one in which not much harm in. He added that Plancius was merely acting in accordance with a well-established tradition at staged events. So if you have a woman who veils herself or comes out and acts like that, she's free game. And here you have Cicero going, don't take away this guy's nomination. That's all he did was take a 12-year-old. And guess what? That guy made it to his office. Crazy. Absolutely wild in the ancient world. And the Jewish world back then, which was... This is not the Christian, and it's not in the scriptures, not in the Torah, not in the Bible. But this was one of their blessings that they would say that was very famous. Blessed are you, our God and King of the world, who did not make me a Gentile, because those people. Blessed are you, our God and King of the world, who did not make me a slave, those people. Blessed are you, our God and King of the world, who did not make me a woman. And they would recite these things as blessings in the ancient world, and still to this day. So many congregations, how do you see things? You go to the Temple Mount, the Western Wall, women on this side, men on this side. You go to mosque, men on this side, women on this side. First century, even in temple courts, you had a court of the women, you had a court of the men. When Jesus comes along, this is the world he's living in. This is the world that he comes to. And what do you notice about him? Because we read it and we're like, oh yeah, that's the way things are now. It wasn't. In fact, he invented this new world that women now take for granted. But look at all the compassionate things of Jesus. I just put together a top 10. There's more and more and more. But the Samaritan woman at the well, think of his tenderness to her. Man, one-on-one, talking with a woman, saying, hey, God is seeking precisely people like you to this woman who's got a shameful past. You're not supposed to talk to Samaritans. You're not supposed to talk to women. To the woman caught in adultery, standing in front of all the religious leaders, shielding her essentially from being stoned to death and taking their rage upon himself for her dignity. The hemorrhaging woman who'd been bleeding for years, Mary of Bethany at his feet, going into their home and teaching Mary and Martha. The sinful woman who anointed Jesus at a religious party where they're all offended. And he's like, she has done what is right. You guys are out of line. He heals Peter's mother-in-law, the bent-over woman, the widow that gives the last 2 coins, that he honors her and shames the religious men. The women who followed Jesus, tons, like there's so many of them if you pay attention. The women at the resurrection, they're the first witnesses of the resurrection. And he wants that recorded. When the woman anoints him for his burial, he's like, wherever my gospel is preached, I want this woman honored. He's always taking people that in that world were like marginalized and they don't count. And he's going, no, they're front and center. These are precious, wonderful people. You get into if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Do you know why they have to write this in the first century? We read that and we put it in modern day context. In the first century, it was absolutely normal for a man to say, I'm done with this wife. I don't want her anymore. Go away. I want someone new. And in the first century, when you're that vulnerable, and it's not like you can just go get a job, because guess what? Jobs are available to women. They were left totally vulnerable. And so the scriptures come and say, you do that to a woman, you're worse than an unbeliever. How dare you do that to somebody that is so dignified as a woman? James 1:27, who do you take care of? Real religion. You go after the widow. You take care of the orphan. Galatians, this would have been scandalous in the ancient world because all inheritance always went to the men. Women weren't even counted in the inheritance. You gave a double portion to your firstborn son, and all the rest of your sons split the rest. And it was up to them to take care of the females, right? Galatians come and says, for as many of you as were baptized into Christ have put on Christ. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There's neither slave nor free. There is no male or female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. And if you are Christ, then you're Abraham's offspring, heirs according to the promise. So Jesus comes, he goes to the cross, he purchases salvation, he takes away your sin, he clothes you with righteousness, and you've got this everlasting inheritance with God. And what Jesus doesn't say, which is counter to all the other faiths, he says you all are heirs according to the promise. Equal in dignity, equal in your inheritance. The wife does not, sexual ethic, wait till you see what the Quran teaches and Muhammad. 1 Corinthians 7 says the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And you're like, right on, that's the ancient world. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. What? Do you know how radical that would have been if you lived back then? To say that the wife has ownership of her husband's body? Are you kidding? But what is this saying? You belong to one another. You absolutely belong to one another. Mark 10, this is when all the divorce laws, because back then they would divorce you for no reason, and Jesus comes and says, whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. What? And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery. Do you know that men were just allowed to divorce willy-nilly? For any reason back in the day. And Jesus comes and says, you do that to her, you cannot remarry or you're an adulterer. You can't just trade your wives. You can't just do that. And by the way, it doesn't matter if he does it, it's adultery. If she does it, it's adultery. And you see this dignity being given to both of the sexes. In Matthew 22, the Sadducees, who don't believe in resurrection, come to him and they say, okay, so what if a guy married 7 women? Or a woman had 7 husbands, and each one of them just keeps dying, which is like, okay, she's unlucky, stay away from her. But anyway, 7 different husbands, they've all died. At the resurrection, who owns her? Like, who does she belong to? Because you hear, they're not asking who does the husband belong to. Hear that? It's who does the wife, in a sense, belong to? And Jesus says something that a lot of people don't like to hear. In the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like the angels in heaven, which means when you get to heaven, there's no more marriage. You all belong. You're a bride to a bridegroom, and you're all equal in dignity. And by the way, you'll love your spouse more in heaven than you ever did here because you'll be without a sin nature. You'll actually be closer than you ever will here because you'll be glorified. But this idea of you own this person or you're there's some kind of belonging like they had in the ancient world, Jesus is like, no, they don't belong to you. They belong to the Lord. Paul, in writing to the Romans, he concludes by honoring the people who are instrumental in his ministry. He points out the deaconess Phoebe. He instructed the church to give her any help that she may need for you because she's been a great help to many people, including me. He commended Priscilla as a fellow worker in Christ Jesus. He affirmed women who had been in prison with him, calling them outstanding among the apostles. He praised other women who worked hard in the Lord. And of 33 different people that he mentions at the end of that book, 15 of them are women. What? What kind of religion employs women? Leaving the next day, we reached Caesarea and stayed in the house of Philip the evangelist, one of the 7. He had 4 unmarried daughters, which means what? They're unmarried daughters. They're under his authority. They don't get to do anything. No. They're prophetesses. What? The Bishop Cyprian of Carthage says in his Testimonia that Christian maidens were so numerous in the early church that they couldn't find husbands because we got all these Christian women, not so many Christian men. Why did that happen? Because in the early church, women were like, this is the first time in the history of the world that any kind of worldview has ever been offered where we are shown dignity, and women flocked to Jesus. Men were like, I kind of like being in charge. I kind of like the free ride where I get to determine everything. And so the men were slow. Women came in droves. And do you know what happened as a result? Rodney Stark points out that the abundance of Christian women resulted in higher birth rates, and this superior fertility contributed to the rise of Christianity. It was, but it wasn't as much knock, knock, will you please accept Jesus? Next house, will you accept Jesus? It's that all the women came. The people that were having babies were Christian women that raised up Christian kids, and demographics over the course of the next 3 centuries took over the world because they understood what was important. And by the way, Clement of Alexandria in the early church writes that the apostles were accompanied on their missionary journeys by unmarried maidens viewed as fellow ministers, and this is his words, fellow ministers and dealing with housewives. It was through them that the Lord's teaching penetrated also the women's quarters without any scandal being aroused. So they're going out in the mission field with the apostles, according to Clement of Alexandria, who's a big figure in church history. Tertullian, who's the famous guy who said the seed of martyrs, or the blood of martyrs is the seed of the church. If you've ever heard that, that's Tertullian. He says, he's writing to his wife. And he's like, this new faith is wild. Like, who would be willing to let his wife go through one street after another to men's houses, and indeed to poorer cottages to visit the brethren? At Easter time, who will quietly tolerate her absence all the night? Who will unsuspiciously let her go to the Lord's Supper, the feast upon which they heap such slander? Who will let her creep to jail to kiss the martyr's chains or bring water for the saints' feet? He's like, there's no, think about how crazy it is that she's allowed to go outside my house. You'll see why in a minute. Like, she gets her own freedom. She has her own ministry. She's allowed to go and see people where there's, you trust her to be outside the house. And the church was so good to women that Marcus Aurelius comes and he makes fun of the church. Why? They've gathered together from the lowest dregs of people a number of ignorant men and credulous women, always ready to embrace anything, and have formed a rabble of impious conspirators. He's like, you know how they're growing? They just went around and got all the stupid women who believe anything. That's what was thrown. Celsus, the biggest critic of early Christianity, he says, with words they acknowledge that such individuals are worthy of their God, and that they manifestly show they desire and are able to gain over only the silly and the mean and the stupid with women and children. In other words, it's like they get all the kooks and women. The women are leading, and women would go around and they would take all the adopted kids off the street and then train them up in Christianity. It was the known thing, and it was scandalous to the Romans. And so now, with all of that in mind, I want to switch, and we're going to go through women in Islam, and we're going to look at some of the hadith. We're going to look at some of the cultural trends that I think are disturbing. Some of this, like, I don't like it. Like, it's a bit alarming, especially when we get toward the end. But right now, European women, more and more, are turning to Islam faster than Christianity. The movement of conservative Europeans converting to Islam, largely women. Women in Islam, the rise of the convert. And so let's just pause and look at some of the global studies when it comes to this. The World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Index ranks 156 countries based on persons' financial security, health, education, civil liberties, political involvement of women. The 15 worst rankings are all Muslim majority countries. Not one single Muslim nation ranked in the top 15. And when you go to like 25, 23 of them are Muslim majority countries. When you look at the way this plays out on a map, some of the countries don't make it, and they're not studied because they didn't allow their statistics to be shared. But where do you notice a concentration of low? Bright blue means great women's rights and equality and prosperity and education and health and everything else. This region, you notice all the colors get very yellow. Why? Like if I were to draw concentric circles coming out of the birthplace of Islam, what do you notice? It's all right there. It's all right there. It's all Muslim law. So Amnesty International reported that Iranian authorities have adopted a new draconian law that further erases human rights of women and girls, imposing the death penalty, flogging, prison terms, and other severe penalties to crush ongoing resistance to compulsory veiling. This is in accord with Islamic law. It's taught by Muhammad, actually. Prevalence of child brides. In Islamic cultures, millions of young girls are sold or given by their parents into marriage. And so this is coming from the UN, which is certainly not friendly to my side. So data is unavailable for a lot of countries, but UNICEF found that the percentage of girls married before they reach 15 is dramatically higher in Muslim cultures. So Niger's 28% of girls by the age 15 are already married off. Chad 24%, Mauritania 16%, Iraq 7%, Nigeria 12%, Afghanistan 10%, Somalia 8%. And when you get to the West, that number goes less than 1%. Female circumcisions are all over the news. And this is where do we have any small kids? Where you take away and you surgically either remove or severely do a number on a woman's clitoris. And so in the Muslim world, there are 230 million females that suffer this fate. And so this comes from a hadith which is disputed. So it's a canonical hadith, but it is a disputed one, where Muhammad has supposedly said that it's better for a woman and more desirable for the husband. And so, according to UNICEF, more than 80% of women in Muslim nations of Somalia, Egypt, Djibouti, and Sudan have suffered genital mutilation. So this circumcision aims to remove a woman's ability to experience sexual pleasure to ensure both chastity and fidelity. So if she doesn't enjoy it, she'll be less likely to cheat on the man. So we'll do this, and the man he doesn't care. So he'll just be able to go on without worrying about her being tempted to do bad things. And if they're young, they're less likely to have premarital sex if it's not enjoyable. And so, again, what do you notice? Female genital mutilation, it's all in those Muslim countries and not so elsewhere. So honor killings, I was just talking about an honor killing that somebody had personal experience with in Syria. 1,000 per year in Pakistan. That's getting better in a lot of these countries, thankfully. Among OIC, so this is Islamic countries, the illiteracy rate for women remains twice as high as the global average. And you'll notice, like here again, the literacy rate among women, and it's Muslim nations. And it's like, okay, why are you telling me all this, Sam? Because with any foundational worldview, if I read the Bible and my highest beauty is Jesus, I'm honoring women because he did, because he acted the way he acted. Why is it that Islamic cultures look diametrically different? And it's because their prophet and their holy writings teach you how to think of women, right? Make sense? And if they're not creatures worthy of being invested in, you're going to see a pretty big difference. And so let's jump into the Quran. Quran 81 verses 8, 9. Muslims often claim that Muhammad was a champion of women's rights by pointing to the fact that he opposed the Arabian practice of killing baby girls by burying them alive in the sand. 100% true. In Arabia, Muhammad comes along. It's a practice. Remember, we're talking about exposure. If you have girls, nobody wants girls. Well, they were burying them alive in the sand to kill them, and Muhammad said, stop doing that. And you're like, okay, well, good. That's really good, Muhammad. I'm really glad that you did that. That's a noble and virtuous thing. In the Hadith, Muslim 1453d, Muhammad spoke about the value of a good wife, and he said the best object of benefit of the world is a pious woman. That's a really wonderful thing, except what do you notice? Like, what is her purpose? She's an object of benefit, right? It's not. Islam is addressed into it in an entirely male perspective. There's no perspective given to the female. You exist to be an object of benefit, to be a pious woman for the sake of the male, right? I mean, it's still I guess a kind thing to say. Bukhari, which is their number one, far and away, their highest trusted hadith, females are inferior. Muhammad repeatedly reminded people of his experience at the gates of hell. So he stands at the gates of hell. He says, I stood at the gate of fire and saw that the majority of those who entered it were women. And so he would repeatedly say this, that majority of people who go to hell are women. And you're like, okay. Muhammad used this revelation to command women to give more money. O women, give alms, as I have seen that the majority of the dwellers of hellfire were you women. And so you go further in the hadith, and the women are like, oh, Muhammad, wonderful prophet, please tell us why you're saying this. And he says, you curse frequently, you're ungrateful to your husbands, I have not seen anyone more deficient in intelligence and religion than you. And he says this multiple times, so it's not just to this group of women. So I've not seen anyone more deficient in intelligence and religion than you. A cautious, sensible man could be led astray by some of you. And then Muhammad explains that female deficiency, and I love the circular reasoning here, female deficiency is why the Quran requires 2 female witnesses for every one man. So he's not saying you group. He's saying all women, anywhere under Sharia law, you need 2 women to equal the testimony of one man. Quran 2:282. Bring to witness 2 witnesses from among your men, and if they're not 2 men, then a man and 2 women. And he's like, why would the Quran that he is reciting to everybody, he uses as proof that Allah thinks women are deficient. Muslim, here's something else. Like, okay, this sounds kind. Act kindly toward a woman, for woman is created from a rib, and the most crooked part of the rib is the top. If you try to straighten it, you'll break it, and if you leave it, its crookedness will remain there. So what does he mean by that? He's saying, okay, you need to be kind to a woman because she's never going to be totally straight. She's always going to be defective. And if you try to straighten out the woman because the rib was made crooked and you try to straighten it out, it'll break at the top, which means the mind and the willpower and everything else. And he's like, just don't. Just be kind to her. She's defective. Don't try to correct her too hard or you'll break her. Muslim 2740, Muhammad. I have not left after me any turmoil more injurious to men than the harm done to men because of women. It's all right. That's not great. Now, how about evil omens? An evil omen may be in 3: a woman, a house, or an animal. So if you want to avoid evil, you'll find them in houses, animals, and women. That's where your evil omens come from. When the prophet heard the news that the people of Persia had made the daughter of Khosra the queen, he said, never will succeed such a nation as makes a woman their ruler. In the Quran, divorced women shall wait concerning themselves for 3 monthly periods, nor is it lawful for them to hide what Allah hath created in their wombs, And their husbands have the better right to take them back in that period if they wish for reconciliation. So if there's a divorce, the woman has to wait 3 menstrual cycles. Why? Because she might be pregnant. And if he has a child, then all of a sudden she's valuable again. And it's up to the man. If he wants you back, you can't divorce. But otherwise, bye-bye, if there's no child involved. Any woman who asks her husband for a divorce, when it's not absolutely necessary, the fragrance of paradise will be forbidden her. So the man can divorce, but if a woman seeks a divorce from a man, unless it's absolutely necessary, she goes to hell. There's a severe double standard that's very, very self-serving to the women, and you can see how this is radically different than anything that Jesus proposes. Ibn Majah, 1854, any woman who dies when her husband is pleased with her will enter paradise. Wow. That means that she could be an absolute nightmare, but if the husband likes her, that's all that matters. God's not interested in how he thinks about her. Allah, this is enough. If your husband is satisfied with you, what does Allah care? You can be welcomed into paradise, which means that your value is found not in the eyes of Allah. Your value is found in the eyes of who? Your husband, period. Isn't that what that communicates? Quran 2:28. Women shall have rights similar to the rights against them. Oh, that's good. According to what is equitable, but men have a degree of advantage over them. Well, then, that's like me and you going into business with a company and being like, you know what? We need to be partners. I get 51% of the say. Well, what good's your 49 then? Oh, too bad I win, 51% again. Then that means you have how much to say? Because everything, the man always has the advantage, which, by the way, I'm a complementarian. I think men are the leaders of their home, but the ethic behind this is radically different, right? After 3 divorces, the couple is not, this is crazy to me. The couple is no longer allowed to remarry unless the woman first remarries someone else. So Muhammad's making up rules as he goes, and he says, okay, husband and a wife, they don't get along. This guy says, I don't want you, divorces again. He's like, oh, I miss you, remarry. I don't want you, divorces. Oh, I miss you, remarry. I don't want you, divorces, remarry, come back together. Muhammad says, you may not get married again until the new husband has tasted her sweetness first. Why? Why would Muhammad make that rule? It's like, this is what he's saying. Before you get that 3rd divorce, you had so better be ready to end that relationship, because if you get that divorce, I just want you to know you're not allowed to remarry her until she's defiled by somebody else. Now, if you're willing to let her be defiled by somebody else and still want her back, you can have her. But you get where we're going here? Like, what value is the woman? You're going to have to force her to have sex with somebody else to remarry. No, you see the lack of agency in there, or even care about purity? My husband, this is somebody who comes to Muhammad, and Muslim, which is another one of the authentic hadiths, high level. My husband divorced me with 3 pronouncements, and Allah's messenger made no provision for lodging and maintenance allowance. In other words, you get nothing. Go away. He divorced you 3 times. You must be really bad. Ibn Majah, 1762, Muhammad prohibited wives from fasting without their husband's permission. And you just see the lack of autonomy. Muhammad required his own wives to abandon prayer when they were having their period. Muhammad's wives had to gain the husband's approval to give charity from household funds. In Islamic cultures, women are not supposed to shake a man's hand, because Muhammad's wife, Aisha, claimed that his palm never touched the palm of a woman. And so this is a sign of great virtue, because in the Quran it says, what is the model of virtue? It's Muhammad is, right? He is the example that you are to follow. He is the epitome of righteousness. So whatever he does, you follow. That's why there is a hadith with the statements and the actions of Muhammad. You're supposed to follow it. This is the great design, right? So do not shake the hand of a woman, and a woman cannot shake the hand of a man. Muhammad was obsessed with the dress of women. And so now we're talking about the clothing and everything else. He once described hell as being filled with tyrants and seductive women who are naked in spite of their being dressed. And so you want to know who's in hell? All those women, it's because they're not well dressed. He says these women are seduced and seduce others with their hair high like humps, which is like if you ever see the ancient drawings in Islamic cultures where they have those. A provocative hairstyle of the era, Muhammad declared these women will not get into paradise. So if you dress casually, provocatively, if you wear your hair in a seductive way, you go to hell. Asma, who's the daughter of Abu Bakr. Who's Abu Bakr? You remember? Abu Bakr is Muhammad's best friend. He becomes the first caliph after Muhammad. Asma was his daughter. She entered upon the messenger of Allah wearing thin clothes, which means like little distance between, they weren't baggy, thin between the body and the clothing. The messenger of Allah turned his attention from her and he said, O Asma, when a woman reaches the age of menstruation, it does not suit her that she displays parts of her body except this and this, pointing to his face and his hands. And so if you want to know why Muslims dress the way they dress, it's a command of Muhammad. You can show your face, you can show your hands, and outside of that, you're in defiance of Muhammad. And so the different things, like if you're wondering, like the terminology, the niqab is this, where you'll see eyes and hands. The hijab is from here up, where it's a head covering. This is a burqa, where it's like even a screen over the eyes. You'll see from Muhammad's words why that exists. You can't even see the eyes. Like it's a screen. And then you have Chador, which is more for Persia and Iran. So Quran 33:59, O Prophet, so this is Allah through Gabriel to Muhammad, O Prophet, tell thy wives and daughters, the believing women, that they should cast their outer garments over their persons when abroad. So head down, in other words, it's covering from over top. That is most convenient, and that they should be known as such and not molested. And Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful. So what does this mean? It means if they're wearing garb that is draped over them to where it's not tight-fitting, okay, people are going to recognize that this is somebody who's set apart. They're religious. They're under someone else's care. They have a husband. They have a father. They're worried about modesty. They won't be molested if the people know that that's the sort of character they have. Any questions so far? I know I'm going like super fast because we have a lot. No questions? All right. Quran 33:53. When you ask your wives for something, do so from behind a screen. Or I'm sorry, when you ask his wives. So Muhammad would have people come over, and Allah is giving this command to anybody who comes over to Muhammad's house. When you ask his wives for something, do so from behind a screen. This is purer for both your hearts and for theirs. It's not right to offend God's messenger, just as you should never marry his wives after him. That would be grievous in God's eyes. And so for Muhammad's wives, you weren't allowed to see them directly. It had to be behind a screen. And so with the burqa, that's the idea. You can't see. You shouldn't be able to see eyes. Now, this is about Muhammad's wives, and so people who take the burqa expand that out. But this is the heart of Muhammad. You can't see my wives. They don't exist to you. What do you do with that? Can you imagine living under that? Can you imagine if that takes root here? Because, yeah, go ahead. At different points, when all at once he had 9, in total he had 11. We'll get to that because some of them are like, wow. Abu Dawood, it's another hadith, so this is authoritative, canonical. Though Muhammad allowed women to visit the mosque to pray, he taught that their houses are better for them. Like, if you must, come, but you should stay home. Why? Because you're a woman. Bukhari 51:95, in an effort to prevent infidelity or temptation, wives are not permitted to allow anyone to enter his house except with his permission. So you're not allowed to have friends over. You stay home, you stay behind your screen when someone shows up. It's just like, holy moly. Quran 33, so this is the most authoritative. Wives of the Prophet. So Muhammad's like, I got a revelation. Oh my, what? Don't you wish you could do that? Oh, Laura, I've gotten another revelation. Wives of the Prophet, you are not like any other woman. If you are truly mindful of God, in other words, if you really love Allah, do not speak so softly in case the sick at heart should lust after you. but speak in an appropriate manner. Stay at home and do not flaunt your finery as they used to do in the pagan past. Keep up the prayer, give the prescribed alms, and obey God and his messenger. God wishes to keep uncleanness away from you, people of the prophet's house, and to purify you thoroughly. In other words, if you belong to Muhammad, you have no life outside of him. And you better shut it down, because nobody's going to see you, nobody's going to want you, nobody's going to desire after you, nobody's going to have an opportunity to come and have an interaction with you. And so you just stay home. If you love God, you'll do that. Abu Dawood 40:48, when going out in public, in order to eliminate any possibility of sex appeal, the perfume used by women should have no odor. Oh, what? Guess who got to wear odored perfume? Oh, good one. Chip, you win. How'd you guess? Muslim 1453d, a married woman once asked Muhammad how to deal with a young, this one's crazy to me, asked Muhammad how to deal with a young male slave. And by the way, this is one of the two Sahih hadith, right? This is authentic. So she's got a young male slave who's coming to her and like being flirtatious. She's bothered by it, and the flirtations are making her husband really mad. So Muhammad instructs her, suckle him, so that he may become your foster child, and thus he may be able to come to you freely. Do you understand what that means? Breastfeed him. What? So, and that way he can become your foster child, which disqualifies him from becoming a potential husband. And you're like, and there's like a whole thing on suckling, like, and the hadith, like it's, can you imagine this? But how demeaning, how gross, actually. Like, I kind of feel bad for the young slave. I mean, golly, how awful. So here's some convenient revelations that come from Muhammad. So on one occasion, Abu Bakr, remember, first caliph, Muhammad's best friend, reported that Muhammad had a sexual affair with Mariah, it's going to be one of his wives, a Christian slave in the house of his wife, Hafsa. Hafsa confronts him for having sex with a servant in my house and on my day, because remember, he's got multiple wives, so it's like, this is your day and who gets what, but now he's on her day going to some other woman who's not his wife, and so he gets a revelation. Oh, let me tell you something. And it says, then the revelation came, allowing him to be with his slave girls again. That's like, what? And it's captured in the Quran. So now imagine this. Your husband, you have multiple wives. So on her night, when you're supposed to have sex with her, which, by the way, this is contradictory because it also says that he had sex with them all every night. But then, anyway, on this night, not so true. He has sex with the slave girl, the servant. The wife is upset. Muhammad gets a revelation, and Quran 66 comes along. In the resulting surah, Allah assured Muhammad that he had the right to pursue other women. O Prophet, Allah said, why do you forbid what Allah has made lawful for you? Like, I know that you feel guilty about it, but Allah's good with it. In fact, we like this. As a result of her protest, Allah told Muhammad that he would be morally justified to seek the dissolution of his oaths to his wives. Who are they to complain? And then Allah rebukes his wives through Muhammad. Maybe if he were to divorce you, your Lord might grant him in exchange wives better than you, those who truly submit to Allah. I like this strategy. Like, I think I'm going to become a prophet. Who are you to question whether or not I cheat on you and have sex with people that I'm not married to and tell you to sit at home behind your screen and not have a life? And gross. Stealing his son's wife, another stellar moment. Muhammad feels an attraction for his adopted son's wife, and after seeing her unveiled. So his son, Zaid, who was Khadijah, his first wife's, bought a slave and gifted the slave to Muhammad, who is Zaid. And so then Muhammad adopts him as a son. Zaid finds a wife, and Muhammad sees her and is like, ooh, she's really pretty. And so Al-Tabari writes that Muhammad came to Zaid's house and saw Zainab, his wife, unveiled. She was fair-skinned and beautiful. So the prophet said, praise be to God who turns the hearts. And Zaid sensed what had happened and offered to divorce her, but the prophet said, no, keep your wife, keep your wife. Well, guess what happens? Muhammad changed his mind and took his son's wife. He then received another revelation from Allah affirming the decision. You were afraid of people, but it is more fitting that you fear God. When Zaid no longer wanted her, we, Allah, this is the formal plural, we gave her to you in marriage so that there might be no fault in believers marrying the wives of their adopted sons after they no longer want them. Whew. So you've got an adopted son who marries a woman that dad comes home and finds her attractive, and now all of a sudden the adopted son's like, oh, yeah, I don't really find her all that attractive anymore, Dad. You can have her. And Allah's like, this is a great idea. Like, yeah, we're going to codify it in the law and say that believers marrying the wives of their adopted sons, that's great. We affirm. And Muhammad, just every time he does something sleazy like this, it's like, got another revelation. What do you do with this? It's hard to be respectful. I don't think it warrants respect. The rape of women dilemma. One hadith, and these come from the Sahih hadith. One hadith recounts how Muslim soldiers took captive some excellent Arab women. They explained, we desired them, for we were suffering from the absence of our wives. The soldiers really wanted to rape these women, but they feared that impregnating them might make them undesirable as slaves in the ransom market. So they confessed to Muhammad. They come back home and they confess to Muhammad with all these slaves, which they've raped. So we decided to have sexual intercourse with them, but they withdrew before emitting semen into the women. And so now they have this moral quandary, and they're eaten up with it. And they come home to Muhammad, and what do you think the moral quandary is? Because it's not whether to rape them. It's whether it was wrong for them to emit their semen on the ground, or if they should have just emitted inside of them. And what does Muhammad say? Because you're waiting for Muhammad, if he's a noble, righteous man, to be like, you did what to women? You took captives and you treated them like this? Off with your head. No, the men asked Muhammad's advice, not on whether it's appropriate to rape the woman, but on whether it was appropriate to avoid impregnating them. So it says in Muslim 3371, we asked Allah's messenger, and he said, it does not matter if you do not do it, for every soul that is to be born up to the day of resurrection will be born. Like, you're not preventing Allah from bringing a life, so just spill your seed on the ground. Keep your slaves from becoming pregnant. God will make every person who's supposed to exist. You're okay. Anyone else, like, ready to vomit? Gross. Gross. Allah permits the rape of captives. Muhammad didn't address the forcible rape of unbelieving captives because Allah had already condoned the rape of female captives in the lucrative slave market for female captives. Allah declared, forbidden are married women, talking about sex, except female captives in your possession. Literally in the Arabic, it's what your right hand possesses. Everybody knows this is captives. It's not even up for debate. So Allah says you cannot sleep with another person's wife. You can't have sex with married women. But guess what you can have sex with? Your wives and those in your possession. So if you go in war and you conquer your enemy, guess who owns all the captives? They're divvied up to the commanders, to the soldiers. You own them. Have at it. Can you imagine this God? Elsewhere in the Quran, Allah blesses believers who guard their chastity except with their spouses or their slaves, also captives. With these, they are not to blame. So you can marry up to 4 women in Islam, and you can have concubines and slaves and captives as many as you want. And Allah, this is the Quran, says, you guard your chastity. You stay faithful to your wives, except concubines and captives. You can have sex with them. And so Muslim men are freely permitted to have sex with their wives, their slaves, and their captives. Now, the majority of Muslims today don't have captives. They don't have slaves. Probably most of them don't have concubines. But they worship a God who says it's okay to rape them if you do. That's a problem. That's not okay. There's a reason why when you see terrorist attacks or terrorist campaigns around the world, there's a common thing that happens, right? There's rape of captives, and they feel morally justified in doing it because of these laws. The limits on polygamy. The Quran only imposed limits on the number of wives allowed in polygamous marriages. So Allah declared, if you fear that you will not deal fairly with orphan girls. Why are they orphaned? Anyone? Because you've just gone through the village and killed everyone. So if you fear that you're not going to deal fairly with them, like how twisted is that? Because you need to deal fairly with them before you rape them. Like if you're going to take them, you may marry whichever other women seem good to you, 2, 3, or 4. And so this is where in the Quran, you get the maximum of 4 wives. Except, guess who got a special exemption from Allah? Oh, shocking. So I put in a few videos of imams teaching on.
You're using the Quran to say that sleeping outside of wedlock is forbidden. Yet, the same source told you about concubines and now you're rejecting it. So either you accept both or you reject both. If you're going to say that sleeping outside of wedlock is forbidden based on the Quran, then based on the Quran, the concubines were made as an exception. And if there's no way around it. So this is now you playing around with the religion. I advise you not to play around with the religion. If the Prophet did it, and that was something that was done with the prophets, then who are you now to come and raise an issue about something that God allowed the prophets, let alone regular people?
And so he's advocating to bring that culture back. And so, like I said, Muhammad gets exempted, again, from the Quran. O Prophet, we have made it lawful for you, the wives whose bride gift you have paid, and any slaves God has assigned to you through war, the daughters of your uncles and aunts on your father and mother's sides, also any believing woman who has offered herself to the Prophet and whom the Prophet wishes to wed. This is only for you, Prophet, and not for the rest of the believers, so you should not be blamed. I want that privilege as a pastor. Like, you guys have to do all this. But me, this is not meant for you, Prophet. Like, come on. Anyway, it's fun to be able to invent your own religion. Muhammad, tireless lover. Remember how everybody has their night? Well, then all of a sudden you get to Bukhari 268, where he marries a total of 11 women, 9 at one time. And so it includes a paternal cousin, 2 captives that he killed their husbands and took them off and raped them and took them as wives later. Muhammad was attentive to all of them. Bukhari 50:68 says the Prophet used to visit all of his wives in one night, and he had 9 wives at that time. Now, I'm going to call BS on this. I'm just going to say it. Anas claimed that the Prophet was given the strength of 30 men, like super viral, or virile. So Islam and polygamy, every nation, this is just like, okay, well then how does worldview impact reality today? Every nation in North America, South America, and Europe has outlawed polygamy. Every one of them. Islam, on the other hand, endorses polygamy for men. Out of the 57 Muslim-majority nations, only 2, Turkey and Tunisia, prohibit polygamy. It's just part of the culture. It's part of the law. Are women allowed to marry multiple men, by the way? Yeah, right. So in early Islam, Muhammad used polygamy as an incentive in warfare and conquest. So they would create battles and they would go in and they would kill all the men and you'd have all these leftover women. And so it would create an imbalance in the number of males and females, and each battle left behind orphan girls from both sides. So Muhammad permitted his soldiers to seize the orphans as concubines and or wives. In one case, Ali. Now, if you know Islam, Ali, particularly in Shia Islam, in all Islam, he's very revered, but particularly in Shia Islam, where they consider that the caliph has to come through the bloodline of Muhammad. Well, Ali is from the bloodline of Muhammad. He's the 4th caliph to serve. But they're conquering all this territory, and so they have to go and retrieve all the plunder. And Ali goes, and it says, on his return trip, Ali committed a sexual act with a slave girl. So he's raped a captive. This is not unusual. When an official named Buraida reported this act to Muhammad, the Prophet rebuked him for tattling and affirmed Ali's right to have sex with the captives, adding that Ali deserves much more than that. Like, it's like Cicero. Like, that's the worst he did? Like, this is the culture. It's like anytime you go outside of Christianity or Western Christian-influenced cultures, this is what you return to. This is the way humanity has been. Outside of Christianity and the revolutionary impact of its ethics, That's the way the world has always functioned. Women are weaker, take advantage of them. And here you see it again. Yeah, Chip. Yeah, they're seen as special prizes. So, like in ISIS, when they were going through capturing all the villages of Syria and Iraq, they would target Yazidi and Christian girls, and they were seen as prizes because we're going to take you and we're going to eliminate you as a number for the Christians, and we're going to rape you and impregnate you and do all those things, and all of your offspring we will steal for the Muslim side. It's seen as a game of conquest. And so if we can eliminate you from being able to procreate it for Islam, and they write about this, that's the crazy thing, then, and we can co-opt you over to the Islamic side by forcing you to have kids. And so the Christians and these nations are so poorly treated. And you were telling me about being spat upon for holding your husband's hand in Syria. It's like you're seen as less than human in a lot of these places. So Muhammad's example for monsters, Islamic terrorist organizations like ISIS, Boko Haram, speaking of, Al-Shabaab and the Taliban have used these verses and stories as justification for sexually abusing captives. They point to Muhammad as their model for behavior. They're not acting outside the bounds of Islam. They're following the example of their prophet. That's the crazy thing about this. This is what he did. Like when you read the stories of him going to K-Bar, torturing this guy by putting a glowing red-hot thing on his chest because he won't tell him where the treasury is. And when this guy dies, he marries his wife, takes her, like right away. So imagine watching your husband being burned and tortured to death, your whole village wiped out, and he's like, you with me, and rapes her. But he loved her. Guys, he loved her. I mean, it's really just gross. After torturing and killing a Jewish man at K-Bar, well, here we go, I forgot this. Muhammad initially gave his widow Safiya, a slave girl from the captives, to a Muslim soldier, but when he saw her beauty for himself, he commanded the soldier to take another slave girl from among the captives, and then the prophet selected her for himself and set out with her. These are all the canonical hadith. This is what he does. Peace be upon him, my ass. Sorry. In a pamphlet offering guidance on the issue, ISIS instructed soldiers it is permissible to have sexual intercourse with the female captive. That's modern day, still happening, right? And then what's their justification? In the pamphlet on this issue, ISIS instructed soldiers if she is a virgin, let her master can have intercourse with her immediately after taking possession of her. However, if she isn't, her uterus must be purified to make sure that she's not pregnant. ISIS quoted Quran 23:5 and 6 and the example of Muhammad as justification in the pamphlet. When you look at October 7th and you think, oh, you know, even if you're sympathetic to both sides and all the complexities of the Israeli-Palestine conflict, what happened on October 7th? You had all of these people in the name of Muhammad and Allah and everything else raid these villages with people who are not armed, they're not militant, they're not soldiers. And what did they do? And you hear story after story after story after story after story of this from these monsters that come into these kibbutzes. What happened? They raped him. And if they survived, they were raped. I mean, you see pictures like this. How many of them where the pants are blood-soaked? Why? It's not because they were shot there. It's because this is permissible in this culture. They're following the example. This isn't an abomination outside of what Muhammad did. So, enjoy this one.
أصل الحرب
If you can read. The female prisoners of war are those whom you own
هم ملك اليمين بمعنى
in order
إن
to
عشان
humiliate them.
أذلهم بيصبحوا
They become the property of the army
ملكاً
commander
لي
or of a Muslim.
القائد أو للجيش أو للمسلم يستمتع
And he can have
بيهم
sex
كما
with them just
يستمتع
like he has sex with his
بزوجته.
wives. Like, these aren't cherry. You can find video after video after video after video after video after video of these kinds of teachings. I don't recommend it. it really warps your mood for a couple of months. But anyway, like just absolutely awful. And it's like, how did we
Under
get here?
Islamic law, one of the conditions of jihad is that the rape of captive women is permitted. They become slaves. In societies like Pakistan or Egypt, Christians live in a state of vulnerability, and one of the things that hangs over their head is the threat of rape. There's this huge problem in Egypt and in Pakistan of Christian girls being abducted and forcibly married off.
That's totally, all of the human rights organizations that go in these places talk about rapes in the thousands, kidnappings in the thousands. And it's like, why? Why does that happen? Even if you look at immigration coming into Europe, the problem is not where they come from, it's what they believe. So in 2018, Sweden convicted 843 rapists. Only 20.8% of Swedes are foreign-born, but 58% of rapists were born outside of Sweden. Why? Why would these Muslim immigrants that have flooded into Sweden have a perspective that is friendly toward rape, that it jacks up their numbers and rape statistics all over the place? In cases of stranger rape, the number jumped to 80%. In Paris, street rapes, 77% of the accused are foreign nationals. Who are the foreign nationals? They're people with an Islamic worldview. In Spain, 45.6% of convicted rapists are foreign nationals. From 2021 to 2023, foreign nationals were 71% more likely to be convicted of a sexual offense in the UK. When you think of the Syria, the war going on and ISIS displacing everybody, and you had this massive migration to Europe, guess when that happened, right? You had flat numbers for rape. Actually, it had gone down a little bit. And then exploding, only getting worse. It's not getting better. And this is when you saw the mass migration. It's precisely in 2014-15, which is when you saw those numbers start exploding. Sad. Muslim women have little or no agency in their sexual lives, right? So this is who is the most abused? Because it's not Western Europe. It's the Muslim nations where women suffer the most. It's the Muslim nations where has the way most victims of terrorism. And usually it's the Muslims who are saying, we don't want to be this radical because they hate them more than anyone. As people trying to moderate Islam, they get killed the quickest. So anyway, Allah teaches, this is Quran, your wives are your fields, so go into your fields whichever way you like. Muhammad also taught, if a man calls his wife to bed and she refuses, he spends the night angry with her. The angels curse her till morning. Right? Like what agency do you have? You exist to serve the pleasures of the man. Notice that there's never anything vice versa. Like if Muhammad is like, I'm tired tonight, Aisha. Like Allah doesn't go, I got a revelation now. Like Muhammad, you can't do that. The angels are mad at you till morning. Like that doesn't happen ever. Of the 57 Muslim nations in the OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the vast majority have no laws against marital rape. And here is a conversation that's on one. It's a actually pretty popular podcast called Let the Quran Speak. And this guy's pretty honest. He's a Muslim, but he believes it. All right, ready? Oh, no, please tell me that didn't lose its thing.
And how does consent play into this at all, or can we understand anything about consent from this end? Like, does the female slave have to consent to that, or is it kind of like because she's owned and so therefore?
In the classical thought, the understanding is that by virtue of the fact that she's owned, she does not have the right to consent, or to withhold herself from her master. The master has the full right over her, and her consent does not play anything in this relationship. We should understand that in the ancient world, women did not have many rights, and even marriage was not as we might expect it today, like a relationship of equality between spouses. So in the Quran itself, a woman is her husband is referred to as her Baal, which literally means her Lord. The interpreters thought of female slaves as having a secondary status, even below this, and that their consent did not matter in this relationship. They were fully owned, and the master had the right to all of the women. In essence, generally in classical Islamic thought, it is taken for granted that a Muslim man can have up to 4 wives at once. And in addition to the 4 wives, he can have an unlimited number of concubines, which refer to women who are basically have slave status. When they are owned by her master, a woman owned by her master has to freely give herself to the master. The master has the right to have sexual relations with her as though she were one of his wives. The believers are those who guard their private parts except from their wives and what their right hands possess. But curiously enough, while this is often interpreted to mean that a man could have sexual relations with his female slaves, it is never interpreted to mean that a woman could have sexual relations with her male slaves.
Shocking. So it's just, you see the trend here. And when he says, like, and he's a Muslim imam who's honest, and I appreciate the honesty, and you can tell he's thoughtful about things. But then he says, you know, Islam was birthed out of these ancient cultures, and so you can't fault Muhammad. And it's like, Jesus lived 600 plus years before him and was radically countercultural, was made fun of for it, stood up for women, did all of these things for women. Muhammad, who is supposedly a greater prophet than Jesus, and Jesus just exists to exalt Muhammad, then Muhammad comes and is the coward. If this is Allah's will and Allah is superior to time and cultures, then he should have said what is right. Instead, he gave a book that they call a miraculously perfectly written book that endorses all of this. Is it otherworldly? Because to apologize for it by saying, well, 700 AD, we can't, well, then this book doesn't transcend time. It's not authoritative. It's garbage, and it is. According to the United Nations, 99.3% of women in Egypt claim to have experienced sexual harassment. 82.6% of these women did not feel safe on the streets. 47% had been physically or sexually abused by a spouse. Quran 4:34, as for women of whom you fear rebellion, admonish them and remain apart from them in beds and beat them. Then if they obey you, do not seek ways to harm them. Allah is exalted, great. So in the Quran, you're commanded to beat your wife. So if you are desiring, and this is specifically in the category of desiring sex and she's withholding out of a rebellious, you beat her. You beat her until she comes around. So here's another teaching. Wife beating is a serious accusation. Let us examine it bit by bit. Allah is honored wives by instating the punishment of beatings. Honored them with beatings? How is this possible? The Prophet Muhammad said, don't beat her in the face and don't make her ugly. See how she is honored? If the husband beats his wife, he must not beat her in the face. Even when he beats her, he must not curse her. This is incredible. He beats her in order to discipline her. In addition, there must not be more than 10 beatings. And he must not break her bones, injure her, break her teeth, or poke her in the eye. There is beating etiquette. If he beats to discipline her, he must not raise his hand high. He must beat her from chest level. You don't get momentum. All these things honor the woman. She is in need of discipline. And Europe, they're flocking to this. So Memory TV, if you want an interesting view, yeah. Both of them are Muslims. So this is Egyptian TV. So if you ever want like an entertaining time, Memory TV goes throughout all the Islamic nations with their religious their religious programming and stuff, and translates it into English with subtitles. So they have Arabic people translating these things. And so if you go to this, and they're faithful, like even Muslims, like they will tell you, yeah, that's what it's saying. And so this is an imam, and this is the host of a show in Egypt. I'm pretty sure it's Egypt. Both Muslims, yeah. All right. Correct. So, therapeutic wife beatings. Dr. Zayed Miqdad, director of the Islamic University of Gaza, emphasizes, quote, the husband's beating of his wife, if it happens at all, should be like a guy beating his sweetheart. It should be a therapeutic beating rather than a vindictive one. And it's like, I don't have categories. I hear that and I'm like, yes, oh yes, how I beat my sweetheart. Okay, now I got it. Like, what? Who, good grief, like first date. Oh, remember how I beat you back then? Like, so no sex after severe beatings. In 1984, Sheikh Youssef Qaradawi, head of the European Council for Fatwa and Research, this is like a notable place, taught that a husband is entitled to the obedience and cooperation of his wife and may beat her lightly with his, by the way, the lightly part, like they just try to clean it up. They beat her lightly with his hands, avoiding her face and other sensitive parts. He added, none of you must beat his wife as a slave is beaten. So in other words, what does that insinuate? We'll get to that next time. And then have intercourse with her at the end of the day. So if you beat her, you can't have sex with her. So choose one or the other. So even if she agrees, okay, I'll have sex again, you can't have sex with her after beating her. And this one is talking about how to properly stone a woman, according to the hadith. She must be covered up to, oh, I can't get these things to happen. That was not going to work. But anyway, what he says is the proper way to stone a woman to death, you have to dig a hole so that her private parts are covered, so that as you're stoning her to death, you don't hit her private parts. There's stoning etiquette, just like beating etiquette. Muhammad the wife beater. In Muslim 23:28, Aisha boasted that Muhammad never beat anyone with his hand, neither a woman nor a servant. But, because these are so trustworthy, in a separate hadith, Aisha claimed that Muhammad struck her in the chest for secretly following him outside of the house at night. So the story goes, Muhammad leaves, and she, being a teenager, a young teenager, follows out. And it's like, I wonder what he's doing. She sees him turning around, coming home, so she races to get back into the house and is out of breath. He comes in, knows that she's out of breath, and Aisha called, he struck me on the chest, which caused me pain. Muhammad then rebuked her for following him because you're not supposed to go outside of the house. We've been through that. Allah tells Job to beat his wife. So you remember how the Old Testament, like he botches the Old Testament? It's so ridiculous how many errors he makes. But in one of the other errors is Allah commanded Job to beat his wife. So if you know the story of Job, Job's wife says, curse God and die. Allah, without mentioning that part, just says, Job, you should beat your wife. And so Job said, take in your hand a bundle of grass, which means flexible plants, and strike your wife with it, whip her with it. The Arabic word translated grass can be all kinds of different things, twigs, branches, reeds. And so, Job, whip your wife. So here's like crazy. This is the one that I don't care of anything else. This is the most reprehensible. You can never explain this away. Awful. Aisha is one of his wives. She's considered like uber royalty in Islam. Aisha is the daughter of Abu Bakr, Muhammad's best friend and Islam's first caliph. When she described her first encounters with Muhammad, she said, I play with the dolls in the presence of the Prophet, and my girlfriends also used to play with me, and when Allah's messenger used to enter my dwelling place, they used to hide themselves, but the Prophet would call them to join and play with me. So notice how, like, what happens with Jesus and children, by the way? They have to be like, the disciples are always asking, do we need to get rid of them? Like they're mobbing you. What happens when Muhammad comes around children? Whew, they are good judges of character. And so he's like, no, call them back. I want to watch you play with your dolls. And so she's sitting there. According to Bukhari 51:58, the Prophet wrote the marriage contract with Aisha while she was still 6 years old and consummated his marriage with her when she was 9 years old. And she lived with him for 9 years until his death. Muhammad was 51 years old when the two were married. Aisha was still a teenager when he died. There's nothing else that you could tell me about Islam that makes this okay for a man to rape a 9-year-old. And it's rape. It is. A 9-year-old that's head over heels in love, and a mature 9-year-old. This is rape. This man's a monster. He's an awful person. He's an evil person. He's developed a demonic religion that cheapens life that brings about subjugation wherever it goes, that treats women like trash, and he rapes 9-year-olds, and people are like, yeah, that's the guy I want to hang my hat on. My whole life, I'll give to him. No chance. If I had a time machine, anyway. So Aisha says, oh, Allah's messenger, a virgin feels shy. Imagine a little girl saying this. So it's time for sex. And this little girl says, oh, Allah's messenger, because that's how you talk to your lover. A virgin feels shy, and he said her consent is expressed by her silence. So if you don't fight back, if you don't object, I'm moving forward. Anyone? Oof.
فأما إجراء العقد
There is no minimum age for entertaining marriage.
يعني ليس له سن معينة في إجراء العقد يعقد على
You can have a marriage contract even with a 1-year-old girl.
على فتاة عمرها سنة زمان.
This is arranged marriage, not to mention a girl of 9, 7, or 8.
هذا مجرد عقد.
This is merely a contract indicating consent with
بين
parents.
بس الولي
The guardian
هنا
in such a case
هو الأب،
must be
لأن
the
الولي
father,
مجبر.
because the father's opinion is
فتصير
obligatory.
زوجته.
Thus, the
لكن
girl
هل
becomes a
هي-
wife. But is the
هل
girl ready for
الفتاة
sex yet or
أو
not?
البنت محل للدخول أم لا؟ طبعا وكم
What is the appropriate age for having sex for the first time?
هذا يختلف
This varies
باختلاف
according to environment and
البيئات
traditions.
وباختلاف الأعراف عند الناس. في ممكن
In
في
Yemen,
اليمن
girls were married
كانوا
off at
يزوجوا
9, 10,
من
11,
9
8, or 13.
و11 و8 و13. في بعض الدول
While in other
تزوج
countries,
من
they are married off
16.
at 16.
في بعض الدول
Some countries have legislated
أصدرت
laws
قوانين ألا يتم الدخول
forbidding having sex
إلا
before the girl
بعد
is 18.
18 عام. ولنا
The
في
Prophet
رسول الله
Muhammad
صلى
is the
الله
model we
عليه
follow.
وسلم قدوة حسنة حيث عقد
He took Aisha to be his wife when she was 6,
عائشة وكان سنها 6 سنوات وبنى عليها يعني
but he had
دخل
sex with
عليها
her
صلى الله
only when
عليه
she was
وسلم
9.
9 سنوات.
يقول 6 سنوات.
لا،
When she was
عقد
6, he
عليها
married
وهي
her at the age of 6.
تزوجها مثلا.
العقد في 6
And he consummated the marriage by having sex with her for the first time when she was 9.
ولنا في رسول الله صلى
We
الله عليه
consider the
نعم.
Prophet Muhammad to be
حسنة.
our model. I don't even know. Why do the guys? It's considered like dignity. The idea, under the covering of Allah, some would say. Like the same reason like you see the yarmulke signifies being under the authority of God in a lot of cases. Head coverings in Christian circles, it's I'm under authority. That's kind of the idea. This is
Juana whimpers as her mother holds her. This is your bride. Please take care of her, says Parwana's father. Of course I will take care of her, replies the man. His large hands grab her small frame.
this was CNN.
Parwana tries to pull away. As he carries her only bag of belongings, she again resists.
It's awful. It is the model of the Muhammad. It's the model of the Prophet. That you saw that turns your stomach and makes you sick and makes you just want to get in a plane and go rescue that girl was made ordinary and lawful by Muhammad. Absolutely awful.
Is
Another
5
one.
years old. The youngest in her father's arms is a 7-month-old baby given in lieu of medical bills. The girls have no say. This in one of Afghanistan's poorest villages. And the deprivation here means girls are being sold into marriage earlier and more often. There's not enough room in the tent for all the parents who want to show us their young daughters they've sold. We don't want to sell them, she says, but we're poor and we have to eat. Hajira had fetched an above-average price, more than $6,000. Then she got injured, and the deal was called off. Once final payments made for his eldest daughter, she'll be sent to her new family. She wants to study and is too young to question what's happening.
When you got married?
My father sold me because we're poor, she tells us. That's what we're told time and again. And in this remote village, it was hard to find anyone who hadn't sold their little girls as payment in kind, to settle debts, or just to buy food. nearly 6 months after the Taliban took control, the country's economy is collapsing. And those like Gulsha, who thought life couldn't get any harder, are telling us it can and just has. She sold her 2-year-old girl, Satera, who she was still breastfeeding. Her family was so desperate. We've no food, no water, and lots of others to feed, she says. What mother wants to sell their children? But there's no other solution. The baby was returned because she wouldn't stop crying, but the family who bought her say they'll be back when she's a bit older. Now Gulsha's trying to find buyers for her 2 other girls. And she's not alone. The extreme poverty across Afghanistan has led to an upsurge in early or forced marriages for money. In this deprived region, girls are reduced to possessions to be bartered over. The remote villages in this corner of Badghis are very conservative and very underdeveloped, and they've long been strongholds of Taliban support. But the Taliban commanders and elders here told us they want the international community back, not the military, but the foreigners' help.
So then ask yourself, like, how does this exist in so many different Islamic cultures? And it's like you can try reform, but if you look and you say that the highest good, the most beautiful example of morality is your prophet, and your prophet does this, no matter how much you try to reform, he's always the example. Try to imagine this flying in a place that holds Jesus as being most beautiful. It's unthinkable. Never. Can you imagine Jesus endorsing this and giving instructions on how to do it, like Muhammad does? Absolutely unthinkable. So now in Britain, you've got these child rape gangs. Well, guess where they're coming from? It's Pakistani,
The sexual
largely.
exploitation of children by grooming gangs is one of the most horrific crimes. Children as young as 10 plied with drugs and alcohol, brutally raped by gangs of men and disgracefully let down again and again by the authorities who were meant to protect them and keep them safe. And these despicable crimes have caused the most unimaginable harm to victims and survivors throughout their lives and are a stain on our society. The findings of her audit are damning. At its heart, she identifies a deep-rooted failure to treat children as children, a continued failure to protect children and teenage girls from rape, from exploitation and serious violence, and from the scars that last a lifetime. She finds too much fragmentation in the authorities' response, too little sharing of information, too much reliance on flawed data, too much denial, too little justice, too many criminals getting off, too many victims being let down. In the local data that the audit examined from 3 police forces, they identify clear evidence of overrepresentation among suspects of Asian and Pakistani heritage men, and she refers to examples of organisations avoiding the topic altogether for fear of appearing racist or raising community tensions. These findings are deeply disturbing. To the victims and survivors of sexual exploitation and grooming gangs, on behalf of this and past governments and the many public authorities who let you down, I want to reiterate an unequivocal apology for the unimaginable pain and suffering that you have suffered and the failure of our country's institutions through decades to prevent that harm and keep you safe.
And so, like, this is a problem, but nobody will call it out. Why? Because if you call it out, what happens? Massive unrest. And so they bury the stories, and huge numbers of girls, young, underage girls, continue to get harassed. And when the public outcry starts going all over social media, what happens? You get police coming to your house arresting you for posting negative things about Islam on social media, which there's been 40,000 arrests for their social media posts in England. Wild to me. And so Islamic law throughout the ages. Like, this is a guy who's very famous, and he's considered one of the best Islamic scholars in history. Al-Ghazali, 1111 AD, heralded as one of the great scholars, wrote, "A man may enjoy his wife in all permissible ways. As for a minor girl, it is not unlawful to touch her with desire or to embrace her. If she is able to bear intercourse, it's not forbidden." So, molester, If you're able to, go for it. If she can bear it, come on. In 1969, Ayatollah Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic of Iran, wrote about this in a book. He said, a man can marry a girl younger than 9 years of age, but he's not allowed to have sexual intercourse with her. Other sexual acts such as lustful touch, embracing, rubbing are permitted. ISIS grants soldiers permission to rape captive children. Citing Muhammad's example, he says it's permissible to have intercourse with female slave who has not reached puberty if she's fit for intercourse. However, if she's not fit for intercourse, then it's enough to enjoy her without intercourse. And it's not like these, like again, like they can go, Muhammad did it, and they'd be right. And so next time we're going to talk about modern day issues, and we're going to talk about Islam and the slave trade, which I never knew about, and that's also mind-blowing. Yucky topic, but this is a worldview that is spreading rapidly, faster than Christianity, projected to overtake us by 2050. And I'm here to tell you that I'm done pretending as if this religion is worthy of respect. It's demonic. This prophet is a monster. It needs to be soundly and roundly condemned. And anybody that would consider this needs to know what this religion actually teaches when you get to the foundational levels of it. Because I don't understand how any decent person can look at what Muhammad taught, going back to all the episodes prior to this, but then especially this, and be like, I'm on board. I want to yield my life to that example. I just don't see it. Yeah, and then we'll pray. Because people, for good reasons, because there's not a good solution. Like, I mean, there are three solutions in front of us. Ready? Here they are. One is revival. You know, that Christ, the love of Christ gets a hold of people and they walk away and, you know, abandon these worldviews that bring destruction and chaos and pain all over the place. That's one. Pray for that. Pray for that one, because the other two are Islamofascism, which is you listen to them in their own words, which we'll talk about next time. They want Sharia. Like, they're coming. They're breeding. That's the goal. They talk about it all over the place. In our country, it's like openly spoken about. New York, all over. So that's one course. I don't love that one, but the other option is, okay, if we can't force their conscience, we have freedom of religion here. If they're going to continue in that direction, can't be conformed to Western values, the only other option is fascism in the other direction, and that's a terrifying thing that nobody wants. Nobody wants that. And so you're left with some really bad options, but if revival doesn't come, and you're seeing a lot of countries in Europe right now that are rejecting this strongly, and it's like they're starting to move toward deportations. They're starting to move toward all that stuff. In America, we give a freedom of religion. I don't ever want a U.S. citizens, because of their faith, to be thrown. Like that, I think when we go down that road and we start handing out, like getting rid of liberties, it's terrifying. But I am like, if you have that worldview, I don't want you coming here. I'm all like, and I'm in a minority. This would sound like radical to people who don't know this stuff. But I don't want another immigrant coming here who believes this stuff. If you're not a citizen now, If you're a citizen now, I'll respect your right because you have constitutional rights. But I'm going to start getting more and more loud because I want people to realize how ridiculous this faith is. I don't want it taking root here because everywhere it takes root, you see maps like we saw earlier. It doesn't end well when they get majorities. Show me a Muslim majority country and show me where women are flourishing. Show me where democratic ideals are upheld. Show me where there's freedoms. Show me where there's dignity and prosperity. And I'll wait. This worldview doesn't jive with the way that this world's been designed, which tells me their version of God is garbage. It's not right. And I don't want it taking root here. Yeah, Ren. Yeah, agree. It's more political. It's about power. all Muhammad stuff. You see how quickly his views change depending on whether or not he has power and influence. It's not religion. Christ came and said, I give everything away, right? I have tremendous privilege, and I give it all away to lift you up. I'll die for you. I'll die in poverty to pour out. You don't see that. That same ethic is not at play. And by the way, there's parts of the Quran that talk about charity and hospitality and family that are wonderful and modest, and all of that's great. But at the same time, ultimately, it says it's about conquest and for Islam to control everything and bring everything under Sharia. There is no compatibility with freedom. And if you like freedom and you like women's rights and you like being able to speak your mind and you like not speaking through a screen, we don't want this here. And people need to recognize that it's the most loving thing you can do for your Muslim neighbors is to speak out and show them what Islam is and wake them up, because it's oppressive and awful. And it's not Islamophobia. I know what Islam is, and it rightly terrifies me. But they have Sharia courts already here. Yeah. All right, let me pray for us, and then I'll be around. Father God, this is heavy and gross, and I don't like researching it. I don't like talking about it. But this is a reality that's present in our world. And God, I just pray for all the women that are in Islamic countries, all the women that are trapped in these marriages, all these little girls that are trafficked in the name of Allah. Lord, I pray that you would deliver them. I pray that you would comfort them, those that are scared, those that are being abused. God, I pray that you would deliver them. I pray that you would make your church bold to stand up for righteousness and not relent to a worldview that is so clearly destructive and harmful. Lord, the most loving thing we can do is to point out that people are on a path to destruction. And God, I pray that you would give wisdom. I pray for a revival in Europe and throughout the world. I pray for deliverance. I pray that all Muslims would come to know that you're a God who loves them so much. You're not this tyrannical God. You're a God who would leave everything aside and come into this world and lay down your own life to lift others up. You're a God who loves to exalt women and the poor and the marginalized. And you call us to live likewise, not to exploit others or to go and to make slaves of unbelievers. God, you call us to love our neighbors, as we're going to talk about this weekend with the Good Samaritan. You're such a good and beautiful God, Lord. I pray that your name would be made famous, that it would be made precious throughout all the nations. And I pray that you would deliver our world from the scourge of Islam and the perversity of its prophet. And God, that you would grant us mercy. I don't know what you have in store, but I know that you're good. And I know that you work all things together for the good of your people and those that are called. Love you. And so, God, we ask your mercy. Pray all this in Christ's name. Amen. All right. Have a good night. Thanks for hanging in. Next week will be so heavy, but it's still pretty shocking.